Yes, it's 8 o'clock, so we can start. So, before we read the para today, I'll read out the summary of what she has said earlier. Okay, then we get the link. Okay, you see, the last word of the previous para is evolution. So, I'm reading the summary of what she said earlier. On what then depends the possibility of divine life upon earth? That's what is discussing. What are the conditions that will allow that to happen? Okay, so one by one, we will have a look. On what then depends the possibility of divine life upon earth? We must recognize the following points. Number one, there is spiritual evolution of the soul developing from birth to birth. Every time it takes birth, the soul is going one step higher. There is an evolution, spiritual evolution. Consciousness is growing. Next point, man is the main instrument of this conscious evolution in nature. That's the second point. The third point, that the body, life, and mind are imperfect tools and cannot fulfill themselves unless there is a descent from above of consciousness, light, force, and ananda to transform them into divine nature. By themselves, mind and life cannot become perfect. They must need upper help. They need help, and that help has to come from above, not from below. Okay. There must be a next point. Okay. There must be a fusion of the lower hemisphere and the higher hemisphere by an ascent of the lower into the higher and a descent of the higher into the lower. If this doesn't happen, then the divine life on earth is not possible. Obviously, because we are talking of divine life on earth. Now, in modern times, materialism has been so dominating that mankind has neglected the higher reality and overstressed the reality of the lower, the physical world. That's very, very obvious. Nah? Everybody is attracted to food, clothes, TV, and whatnot. Okay, materialism has cleared. It has done some good. Okay, so of course, materialism has cleared the cobwebs of confused thinking and superstitions, and its positive contribution has been appreciated. But its belief in the sole reality of matter has distorted the right view. Okay? That's the whole problem. Mind is not the last rung of the evolutionary ladder. There are higher planes which have to be attained. This is what he has said in the previous one. Now today we read this one, mind and life themselves. Just now we said that mind and life by themselves cannot perfect themselves. Maybe a little bit of change may be possible by will, but transformation of mind and life cannot happen unless there is help from above. Okay.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What was the second point? One is spiritual evolution. Then the second point was what? Man?
I'm telling you. Just 1 second. Just 1 second. Yeah. This first is the spiritual evolution of the soul. Second is man is the main instrument of this conscious evolution in nature. Before man came, the evolution was mechanical and very slow. It took millions of years. But now that man has come into the picture, nature has created man so that the aspiration towards spiritual life can go much faster. Okay, so that is man is the crucial element in the evolution of the earth. That's the second point.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we come back to our mind and life themselves cannot grow in their fullness except by the opening up of the larger and greater consciousness to which mind only approaches. Okay? Mind can only approach it to a certain extent. Because when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness, it is mind. Okay? It is mind, the larger mind that goes up. All these spiritual planes are mind planes only, Srila says. Such a larger and greater consciousness is the spiritual. For the spiritual consciousness is not only higher than the rest, but more embracing, much wider. Okay? Universal as well as transcendent, it can take up mind and life into its light and give them the true and utmost realization of all for which they are seeking. In other words, mind can be transformed to a large extent, vital also can be transformed if you rise into the spiritual planes of consciousness. Not yet the supermental, the spiritual planes. Okay? You become much wider and wiser also. Okay, so it's saying universal as well as transcendent. It can take up mind and life into its light and give them the true and utmost realization of all for which they are seeking. It can do that, the spiritual planes of consciousness. For it has a greater instrumentality of knowledge, a fountain of deeper power and will, an unlimited reach and intensity of love and joy and beauty. All these are available at the level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness. What is missing is the power. Okay? Then these are the things for which our mind, life and body are seeking. Knowledge, power and joy. You are seeking power, but how much power can you get in the spiritual planes? Can you get fully? That's the question. And to reject that, by which all these arrive at their utmost plenitude, is to shut them out from their own highest consummation. Now, what is Srila saying here? He's saying something interesting. He's saying, these are the things for which our mind, life and body are seeking, knowledge, power and joy. And to reject them, by which all these arrive at their utmost plenitude, is to shut them out from their own highest consummation. Who is rejecting? The Mayavadins and the Buddhists. Because they are going into the absolute non-existence. They are going into the absolute nirvana, absolute shunyam. So Srila is saying that instead of taking advantage of the spiritual planes of consciousness, from which you can go even higher up, they are disappearing into the shunyam. They are disappearing into the nirvana. Okay? So you are missing all the glories of the spiritual planes of consciousness. Is to shut them out. Next, an opposite exaggeration demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence nullifies the creative action of the spirit and excludes from us all that the divine manifests in his being. I'll read the whole sentence, then we'll come back to phrases. It leaves room only for an evolution without sense of fulfillment, for a cutting off of all that has been evolved is a soul culmination. It turns the process of our being into the meaningless curve of a plunge into ignorance and return out of it, or erects a wheel of cosmic becoming with only an escape issue. So big sentence, but now we'll see what he's saying. So he's talking about an opposite exaggeration. What is that? The first is the going beyond the spiritual into the nirvanic consciousness, which is the absolute shunyam. Okay? That's when we're saying it is not very intelligent thing to do because you are missing all the glory of the spiritual planes of consciousness. Now, an opposite exaggeration, demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence, that means now you don't want to disappear, but you remain in the spiritual plane of consciousness. But what are you asking for? You are not asking for joy and power. You are asking for only a colorless purity of spiritual experience. That is to say, you are absolutely untouched by anything. It's a great achievement, but still, Srila causes a negative realization because you are only a colorless purity of spiritual experience. You have a presence, you feel a presence of the divine. You feel an absolute non-attachment. You have no attachment at all to either pleasure or pain or anything or power. You are not bothered. You are just bothered about your purity and your release, freedom. So Sri Aurobindo is calling that colorless purity of spiritual existence. Why? Because if there is joy and there is power, then it doesn't become colorless. It becomes full of color and full of interesting things. Okay? So that's why Sri Aurobindo is calling it. Both these things are at the spiritual level of consciousness. Okay? So the first is you are rejecting the spiritual level of consciousness and going into the, like the Buddhists and the Mayavadis. So that doesn't help anybody and doesn't help the evolution either. But neither does the evolution being helped if you want to stay put in the spiritual plane of consciousness. It doesn't help anybody. That's what I'm explaining in the next few phrases. Okay? An opposite exaggeration, demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence. You have gone into the spiritual plane of consciousness, but you are interested only in peace and silence and release, freedom. That's all you are interested in. So an opposite exaggeration, demanding only some colorless purity of spiritual existence, nullifies the creative action of the spirit. So creative action of spirit can come only from power. Okay? And excludes from us all that the divine manifests in its being. So all the other planes of consciousness and the physical world, okay, you are rejecting. There's so much beauty in the physical world. It is true that there is suffering and there is also perversion. It is true. But is it not true that there is also tremendous beauty? Okay? Look at all the sunset, the flowers. Okay? There's tremendous color and tremendous beauty in life. So that we are missing. So that's what I'm missing. It leaves room only for an evolution without sense of fulfillment. So we are rejecting the physical world's beauty and joy, and you are also rejecting the beauty and joy of the spiritual plane of consciousness. You are only wanting release. Okay? You are only wanting moksha. So that is not good enough for this evolution into the spiritual plane of consciousness, where the divinization of matter also can take place. That's not good enough. Okay? That's what I'm saying. Now, I read the next phrase. Okay, the divine manifested being. We led up to that. It leaves room only for an evolution without sense or fulfillment. In other words, a spiritual man, when he is seeking liberation, he is going only up to the spiritual level of consciousness where there is only peace and freedom. But it is without sense. Why? Why without sense? You came from the silence, you are coming down to the physical world and going back again by rejecting the physical world and getting back to where you were. Why at all did you come down? You have meaninglessness. So you could have remained there only on top, the individual. Okay, it has nothing to do with evolution. That's what he is saying. Okay, so it leaves room only for an evolution without sense of fulfillment. The evolution stops at the spiritual level of consciousness, for the individual, and maybe also for the race, but certainly not changing the conditions in the physical world. Divinization of matter is not included in the spiritual aim of life. That's what Selva is saying. Okay? For a cutting off of all that has been evolved is a soul culmination. You have evolved from matter, you have evolved life, and you have evolved mind, and now you are cutting that away and saying, I will stay put in the spiritual plane of consciousness, free, okay, and peaceful. That doesn't help anything. Okay? It helps only the individual. And even the individual is only asking for one element of the divine being. He is asking only for peace and freedom. Why don't you ask for the other things also? There's so much beauty and joy in that. That's what Selva is saying. For a cutting off of all that has been evolved in the soul culmination. It turns the process of our being into a meaningless curve of a plunge into ignorance and a return out of it, or erects the wheel of cosmic becoming with only an escape issue. So, to make this set those points very clear, as I said, and I use that again. If I go to Chennai one day and do some work there and come back, then there's some meaning. I've been there. But if you go there and come back without doing anything, why the hell did you go there at all? So the soul is coming down to the physical world and going back to where it came from without doing anything, by rejecting the physical world. So that's useless, meaningless. That's what Swami wanted. Clear? It turns the process of our being into a meaningless curve or a plunge into ignorance and return out of it, or erects the wheel of cosmic becoming with only an escape issue. Okay? There's a cosmic becoming. The soul comes down and goes up again. Okay? Everything comes down and goes up again. Okay? So that's what he's saying, meaningless. There has to be a change in the physical world for the. Why was the world created at all if there was no aim in it? That's what Swami wanted. Now he's bringing in the element of the evolution to the next level. Okay? There has to be meaning in spiritual life. I go to the next sentence. The intermediary supra-terrestrial aspiration. Now remember the word supra-terrestrial aspiration is the second aim of life. You go beyond the earth, reject the earth, and go into the spiritual plane of consciousness. Not supra-cosmic, supra-terrestrial. Okay? The spiritual aim of life. The intermediary, the supra-terrestrial aspiration, cuts short the fulfillment of the being above by not proceeding to its highest realization of oneness, and diminishes it below by not allowing a proper amplitude of sense to its presence in the material universe and its acceptance of life in the earthly body. So now he is saying that there will be meaning in the spiritual life if it goes above. Okay? If it does not proceed to the highest realization, but if it proceeds to the highest realization by going beyond level 2 of the spiritual plane of consciousness, then in that it makes sense, because not only have you gone higher, but then you get the power also to change the lower. So there is some work being done at the lower, then it has got some meaning. But if the work is not being done at the lower and you stay put at the spiritual plane of consciousness, it is meaningless. It doesn't help anybody. That's what Swami wanted. So the intermediary, the supra-terrestrial aspiration, Swami is saying, stop short. So what Swami wants is, you go to the supra-cosmic, okay, not the supra-terrestrial. This is only the intermediary. It's only the middle level. Okay, so you go to the highest level, and from there you can have the power to change the lowest also. That's what he's pointing out. I'm reading the sentence again carefully. The intermediary, level 2, the supra-terrestrial aspiration cuts short the fulfillment of the being. The being is only experiencing peace and freedom, nothing more. Above, by not proceeding to the highest realization of oneness, the highest realization of oneness, supermental, okay, and diminishes it below by not allowing a proper amplitude of sense to its presence in the material universe and its acceptance of life in an earthly body. But if it does go to the supramental, it will have the power even to change it will accept life and also change the earthly body. So, a large relation of unity and integration restores the balance, okay, illumines the whole truth of being, and links together the steps of nature. What are the steps of nature? Matter, life, and mind. And if you stop at mind, there doesn't seem to be any meaning in having come down at all. So you have to go to the next level. And that's what we are describing as a large relation of unity. Not a narrow relation of unity. Not only the individual, but the entire large relation of unity and integration. In other words, you are rejecting nothing. An integration. You are taking the lowers also and integrating it to your realization. Restores the word integration is so important there, you can see. Okay. There's a whole chapter in Life Divine, ascent and integration. If you take only the ascent, you are rejecting the lower. But if you ascend and take up the lower also into your consciousness, then that makes sense. Okay. This restores the balance, illumines the whole truth of being, and links together the steps of nature. Now there is meaning. You have done something for the lowest. There is some progress in the lowest. Okay, that's what he said. When you come down, you have to see that something has changed in the lowest. He is giving you all the conditions for a divinization of life. Simply a spiritual life, stopping at the second level, is not enough for a divinization of matter. So many people have become free. Okay, mukti they have attained, but has it changed anything in the physical world? No, nothing. So therefore, you have to go to the third level. That's what I said. That completes the paragraph. So now, to summarize, okay, we'll see what he's saying. I'll read the summary, and then you'll get the thing in its gist. Okay, so what he said in this paragraph. What is meant by the fulfillment of life and mind? So now he's answering. We have in the lower hemisphere our body, our life, our vital, and our mind. They are limited and imperfect instruments, but their fulfillment would mean, number one, the body becomes perfectly healthy and even possibly free of disease, old age, and death. Okay? Then it will be fulfillment of body. Creates itself and dissolves itself. This I have added, okay, for clarity's sake. Okay, he has said all this earlier, but I have added all this. The body creates itself and dissolves itself by its own will as required. Okay? This is the, he has said all this in the supramental manifestation of honor. Okay? It creates itself and dissolves itself by its own will as required without being subject to any other law imposed by nature. We are all subject to laws of nature. We are sure to die. But the supramental body will not die. Okay? It will have conquered death and conquered disease and conquered old age, everything. Next, what about the vitals? What about the vitals' fulfillment? The vital seeks expansion, possession, power, enjoyment, mastery, and gets all this in full measure if it is fulfilled. Next, the mind seeks knowledge and omniscience and acquires it fully if it is fulfilled. But our life and mind are limited and cannot achieve what they seek unless the higher hemisphere of light, power, consciousness, and bliss descends into body, life, and mind and transforms them into the divine instruments that they really are meant to be and to become finally. The instruments we have, body, mind, life, can become absolutely divine. Now, the higher hemisphere has the power and consciousness that can transform the outer nature of man in the lower hemisphere. Okay? That power is there in the supermind. There must be a rising of the lower into the higher and a descent of the higher into the lower. In this way, the synthesis desired can be achieved. But sometimes only an ascent of the lower leads to peace, infinite freedom, liberation. And this is often considered a sufficient spiritual reward for the yogic effort. But this, Sri Aurobindo says, is a halfway house. It's a relatively colorless peace and calm without power and bliss. Besides, it leaves the lower nature as imperfect as it was before liberation. So therefore, what's the point? The ascent has to proceed even further beyond the mutable earth and the immutable spiritual heights of the highest summits of fulfillment, consciousness, force, and bliss. This fulfillment intended by the interior path, and this has to be achieved here on earth. This is the supramental consummation. This is what's investing in the paragraph. Okay. So we still have 15 minutes. Now we can read the next. So you've seen, Sri Aurobindo says the spiritual aim of life is just not enough for the divinization of matter. We have to go even higher. Okay. So now we can read the next one. In this integration, the supracosmic reality. So who will read? Anyone?
Challenging.
Yes, we can read Shilpa. In this integration.
In this integration, the cosmic reality stands as the supreme truth of being. To realize it is the highest reach of our consciousness. But it is this highest reality which is also the cosmic being, the cosmic consciousness, the cosmic will and life. It has put these things forth not outside itself, but in its own being, not as an opposite principle, but as its own self-unfolding and self-expression. Cosmic being is not a meaningless prick of fantasy or a chance error. There is divine significance and truth in it. The manifold self-expression of the spirit is its high sense. The divine itself is the key of its enigma. A perfect self-expression of the spirit is the object of our terrestrial existence. This cannot be achieved if we have not grown conscious of the supreme reality, for it is only by the touch of the absolute that we can arrive at our own absolute. But neither can it be done to the exclusion of the cosmic reality. We must become universal, for without an opening into universality, the individual remains incomplete. The individual separating himself from the all to reach the highest loses himself in the supreme heights, including in himself the cosmic consciousness. He recovers his wholeness of self and still keeps his supreme gain of transcendence. He fulfills it and himself in the cosmic completeness, a realized unity of the transcendent. The universal and the individual is an indispensable condition for the fullness of the self-expressing spirit. For the universe is the field of its totality, self-expression, while it is through the individual that is revolutionary self-unfolding here comes to its acme. But this exposes not only a real being of the individual, but the revelation of our secret eternal oneness with the Supreme and with all cosmic existence. In his self-integration, the soul of the individual must awake to universality and to transcendence.
Okay, so very, very important to this paragraph is the condition that we spoke of earlier, that 2 paragraphs earlier, that man is a very important element in this. So, can the divinization of matter take place without the help of man? So he is very clearly saying no, because he's not saying no in such words, but that's what the implication is. That it is man who has to first transform himself and become supramentalized. Then even one man is not enough. He says that in his evening talks and other places also, he needs a whole body of men who will become supramentalized. Then the possibility of a divinization in matter will be possible. Okay, so man, he has to first rise. The evolution will not rise without man into this supramental plane. It is man who has to rise first, and then he becomes the instrument of the divinization. So this is basically what he's saying, and we'll do 2 things. It is 10 minutes we have got. I'll read the summary so that we get the basic idea of what he's saying here. Then we'll go into each one. Okay. I'm reading the summary. When we study Sri Aurobindo, this is very important because Sri Aurobindo, he starts discussing without telling you what he's going to say. Okay? Normally, you would say, I'm going to establish this. Okay, I'm going to say this. and then you start exposing and supporting your statement. Or at the end you say that this is what is intended. But Shiva doesn't do that. We get lost in the details. So it's very important to get a summary of what he's saying, either before or after. Then you get the whole gist. Otherwise, his explanations are so detailed that you get lost in the details. Okay? So that's why the summarization is so important. This Supreme Absolute, I'm reading the summary of what we read just now. This Supreme Absolute, he told you just now that mind and life cannot perfect themselves except by rising to the higher level. And what is the higher level? The supramental or the Supreme Absolute. So now, this Supreme Absolute, the supracosmic, is the ultimate reality. It is beyond the mutable and the immutable. Mutable is level 1, our physical existence. And the immutable is a spiritual plane of consciousness, level 2. It has to go to beyond that. That's what he's saying, level 3. Okay? This is the supramental gnosis that creates the cosmos and the individual, but within itself. Okay? The supermind is not creating something out of itself. It is creating something within itself. How? Because at the highest level, there is nothing else but God. And when God is creating something, he is not creating outside himself. There is nothing outside him. So he is creating only within himself. Okay? That's what we have to understand also. Therefore, it is at once transcendental, cosmic, and individual simultaneously. This is what he is saying. So a divinization of earth can take place only when all the 3 levels have been experienced and made permanent. Experience won't do, it has become permanent. Transcendental, cosmic, and individual simultaneously. On earth, it is the individual who is a pivotal point on which the evolution becomes conscious. Before that, the evolution in nature was very slow and unconscious, mechanical. So, the individual has to first universalize himself by losing ego. Then he must become the transcendent. This is what the individual soul has to achieve. Become transcendent and cosmic, and even while retaining this real individuality, by losing the false individuality of the ego. He has to get all the 3. That's what Swami is saying in the back. Okay? It's an individual who has to do that. He has to first go to the spiritual plane of consciousness, then he has to go to the supramental consciousness. Then only the collective change can come. So, now, we still have 6 minutes. I'll quickly go through. Now you've got the basic idea, so it should not be very difficult. In this integration, what is the integration? Integration of the 3 levels. Okay? All together. That's what is meant by integration. Not exclusive. The others are excluding. The materialist is excluding the higher, the spiritual man is excluding the lower and the higher, and the highest is not excluding anything. It includes everything. In this integration, the supracosmic reality stands as the supreme truth of being. So, the supracosmic reality, the supramental has to be reached for the integration. To realize it is the highest reach of our consciousness. But it is this highest reality which is also the cosmic being, cosmic consciousness, cosmic will and life. Okay? The highest is not static and limited only to its highest status. It is also the lower status. It's also level 2. It's also level 1. That's what he's saying. Okay, so, but it is the highest reality which is also the cosmic being, the cosmic consciousness, the cosmic will and life. It has put these things forth, not outside itself, but in its own being, not as an opposite principle, but as its own self-unfolding and self-expression. Cosmic being is not a meaningless freak or fantasy or a chance error. There is a meaning. The cosmic being is the physical world. So it is not, as materialists say, it has come into existence by a freak. Not at all. There is a very clear intention in creating the physical world. That's what we pointed out. Cosmic being is not a meaningless dream or fantasy or a chance error. There's a divine significance and truth in it. In the physical world, the manifold self-expression of the spirit is its high sense. The divine himself is the key of this enigma. So what Sundar is saying, the physical world has been created so that slowly through evolution, the physical world can become more and more perfect in small evolutionary steps. That is the intention of creating the physical world. And the divine is the key to this enigma. Enigma, if you see only the physical world, is an enigma. Why was it created? Why was it suffering? Why was it pain? Why was this imperfection? A perfect self-expression of the spirit is the object of the terrestrial existence. Very clear statement that the object, the aim of terrestrial existence, the physical world was created because the spirit, God, wants to express himself perfectly in the physical world of imperfection. That's what it's saying. Okay? This cannot be achieved if we have not grown conscious of the supreme reality. So now the individual comes in. This cannot be done unless the individual becomes conscious of the supreme reality. For it is only by the touch of the absolute that we can arrive at it, our own absolute. The absolute has to be reached. Otherwise, remaining down, you can't understand the absolute. Of that absolute, that we can arrive at our own absolute. Just 1 minute. I'm getting it. This cannot be achieved if you have not grown conscious of the supreme reality. For it's only by the touch of the absolute that we can arrive at our own absolute. But neither can it be done to the exclusion of the cosmic reality. So you have to first go to the cosmic level, then you have to go to the supreme level. You can't go directly to the double promotion and go straight away from the physical world to the supramental. Not possible. That's what Sundar is saying. Okay. We must first become universal, for without an opening into universality, the individual remains incomplete. Having gone to the spiritual consciousness, now you have the possibility of going to the higher level. The individual, separating himself from the all to reach the highest, loses himself in the supreme heights. This is interesting. So, the individual, separating himself from the all to reach the highest, loses himself in the supreme heights. So, we're talking about the Buddhists and the Mayavadin. Okay? So, when you go up, you get only the nirvana. You don't get anything else. You are rejecting the physical world and even the spiritual world you are rejecting. Separating himself from the all. All means the lower and the second. First level and second level, you are rejecting. You lose himself. You lose yourself. You don't fulfill yourself. That's what it is. Including in himself the cosmic consciousness, he recovers his wholeness of self and still keeps his supreme gain of transcendence. He fulfills it and himself in the cosmic completeness. So first you have to spiritualize yourself, then you go to the higher level of consciousness, then you can possess all the three, transcendent, cosmic, and universal. A realized unity of the transcendent, universal, and the individual is an indispensable condition for the fullness of the self-expressing spirit. So the condition for spiritualization of matter is the consciousness must be transcendental, cosmic, and individual at the same time. That's basically what we say. So, I'll read the last sentence, we'll finish it. But this presupposes not only a real being of the individual, but the revelation of our secret eternal oneness with the Supreme, with all cosmic existence. But this supposes not only a real being of the individual, but the revelation of our secret eternal oneness with the Supreme, with all cosmic existence. What's the meaning? He's saying that the individuality disappears when you go to the spiritual level of consciousness. It's not the individuality that disappears, it's the ego which disappears. So the individuality is still there. That's what he's pointing out. In his self-integration, the soul of the individual must awake to universality and to transcendence. You cannot lose your individuality. You have to keep your individuality. As the Buddhists and Mayavadis are saying, no individuality, we don't want. We lose our individuality and disappear into the infinite. Okay? So that's what Sylvie is saying. He is going into great detail and telling you that the spiritual aim of life is just not enough for the divinization of life. Okay? So I stop here today. Next time we'll take up the supra-terrestrial existence. So not supra, the supra-terrestrial is the spiritual aim of life. Then the supra-cosmic, we will deal with that later on. Okay? I'm cutting the link.
Dada, Dada,
Yes.
just one question. When somebody is going to the Nirvana, what happens to their psychic being?
There is no psychic being, it disappears. The psychic being itself goes and merges. The river goes and merges into the sea. There is no more river.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you, Dada. Thank you.
Yes. There is no more river.
Arobar, Arobar, Arobar.
Okay.
Thank you, Rangada.
Yes, Kiran. You want to say,
Thank you.
you want to say something?
No, Rangada.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.